Why would someone with a seven-figure IRA voluntarily hand the IRS the single biggest tax bill of their life all in a single year? Well, there's a reason. And in 2026, more executives with millions sitting in tax-deferred accounts are doing this than at any point that I have seen. For years, the entire Roth conversion conversation was built around one single deadline: convert before 2026 because tax rates were scheduled to jump. Well, Congress removed that, and the countdown that everyone was converting against is now gone. So most people concluded there's no rush anymore. But that might not be the right conclusion, because Washington's deadline was never the one that mattered. The one that actually decides this sits on your own income timeline, and almost no one thinks to look at it. I'll show you what I mean using the example of a 58-year-old couple with $3 million sitting in pre-tax retirement accounts. And we'll run 5 versions of this side by side. Convert nothing, fill the 22% bracket, fill the 24% bracket, recalculate it every year, or convert the entire account at once. I'll show you the exact tax cost of each one, what each leaves behind in required distributions, and what the family actually keeps after taxes over the course of their lifetime. The gap between the best version of this and the worst is about 1.7 million in today's dollars. And I'll show you the mistake that wrecks this for most people before they ever get to calculate the math. So let me share with you a household and how this plays out. Everything I'm about to share with you here is using rough numbers to protect clients' privacy. Picture an executive, age 58, who's married and spouse is age 56. He's leaving his corporate role at the end of this year, and the household is set to bring in about 1.1 million across both salaries, bonus, and equity. They've got 3 million in pre-tax accounts, about 450,000 in a Roth, roughly 1.5 million in after-tax brokerage, and some additional cash on the side. If they do nothing at all, here's where this ends up. That 3 million in pre-tax accounts grows untouched for another 15 years until required distributions start at age 73. That 3 million grows to roughly 6.4 million in today's dollars by that time. His first year required distribution alone is about 230,000. Not because he needs the money, but because the IRS says so. Over their lifetime, doing nothing cost this family about 3.4 million in taxes. So that's the number sitting in front of them before anyone converts a single dollar. And here's the part that surprises people. Most people look at a household like this and think the fix is obvious. He retires, his income drops, and the next year he starts converting pre-tax to Roth. But watch what actually happens to their income after he leaves his job. The year after he leaves, he's still got around 250,000 in severance, equity, and deferred comp. His spouse is still working, and he's picked up some consulting work. Add it all up, and they're still recognizing over 400,000 in income. So that year looks like the first retirement year, but it's actually a false window. There's almost no room to convert efficiently because the earnings tail is still paying out. And the next couple of years, the picture still stays crowded. Deferred comp, spouse's income, consulting, it keeps the tax return full. Then the spouse retires, and the deferred comp and equity income wind down. Now the consulting is the primary earned income, and the baseline finally drops. And that is the true income control window. In this household, it opens up at 62 and starts closing at age 70 when Social Security turns on. 8 years, that's the whole thing. And they spent the first 3 of them thinking they were already in it. Now, what you just watched has 3 phases. And almost every executive misreads the first one. Phase 1 is the earnings tail. That's the 250K still landing after his last day of corporate work. A final bonus, severance paying out over time, RSUs still vesting, options getting exercised, deferred compensation paying out on a schedule that he set 6 years ago, the consulting income, a board seat, and a working spouse. So your traditional W-2 can stop long before your income does. Phase 2 is what I call the income control window. His baseline finally drops, and he has real control over how much taxable income to recognize. This is where Roth conversions, strategic withdrawals, and capital gain decisions actually have room to happen. The goal in these years isn't to pay the least tax possible. It's to use these open years before less flexible income shows up again. Phase three is the retirement income floor. Social Security switches on, and if you have pensions or annuities, maybe those turn on income as well. And eventually, required minimum distributions force money out of your pre-tax accounts, whether you need it or not. So here's the whole thing in one sentence. Your conversion window opens when the earnings tail ends, and it starts closing when the retirement income floor rises. Now, one note on the tax law that certainly matters. Removing that scheduled sunset does not mean that tax rates can never rise again. A future Congress can rewrite the code anytime it wants. What disappeared was an automatic national deadline that forced everyone's hand on the exact same date. The law created some certainty for the time being, but it did not create a definite window. This household's window, and many others for that matter, has nothing to do with Congress and everything to do with their own calendar. So, what should they actually do inside that window? 5 options, and they are not all created equal. Before we compare them, understand this. A Roth conversion doesn't eliminate tax, it accelerates. And under current law, once it's done, it generally can't be undone. So the question is rarely, can they afford the tax this year? It's whether paying it now leaves this family with more after-tax wealth later. Strategy 1 is do nothing. Let the pre-tax accounts keep growing. That's the simplest fact. But $3 million growing for years creates very large required distributions later and a potential large tax bill for a surviving spouse that's filing as a single taxpayer. Strategy 2 is to convert just enough each year to fill the 22% bracket. That moves about $1.25 million out over 11 years, equating to about $260,000 in tax. Strategy 3 is to convert more aggressively up to the 24% bracket. But let's be clear about what that actually means. To run strategy 3, this household writes tax checks of roughly $700,000 over 11 years. Years where their tax bill could be close to nothing. That's the trade. And it should feel uncomfortable because it is. Strategy 4 is a dynamic conversion where the amount is recalculated every single year based on actual income, brackets, your state, Social Security, Medicare, and what your kids are likely to inherit. And strategy 5, the provocative one, is to convert the entire IRA in a single year. Now, I'll give you the full comparison in a moment. But before I do, I want you to see what each strategy is actually buying. Because the tax savings number on its own is the least interesting part of this. The first thing it's buying is lower required distributions. For our reference client, if they do nothing, they've got $6.4 million sitting in an IRA at age 73, throwing off $230,000 a year in required distributions that they didn't ask for. If they fill the 22% bracket, they'll have roughly $4.6 million in the IRA and about $168,000 in RMDs. Fill the 24% bracket, and it's down to $1.1 million and $49,000. If they go with option 4 and run it dynamically, it would be subject to various factors at that time. But based on today's data, it would result in the IRA having about $2.2 million and the RMDs being at $81,000. And if they go with option 5 and convert it all, well, it's pretty simple. The IRA and the required distributions are zero for it. The second thing that conversions buy is protection for whoever outlives the other. Statistically, one of them will file as a single taxpayer for 5 to 10 years or more, which results in the same income, but half the standard deduction and compressed brackets. With our client, if the husband passes away at age 2 and the wife files single for the next 10 years, here's the difference. If they did nothing, she would pay about $156,000 a year in federal tax. And if they ran the dynamic scenario, she pays about $39,000. That's $117,000 a year over 10 years or maybe more. The third thing to consider is Medicare. Conversions push their premiums up in the years that they convert, and that's a real cost. But it's a temporary cost in exchange for a permanently lower income floor later. In our scenario, doing nothing costs them about $164,000 in lifetime Medicare surcharges. The dynamic strategy costs $106,000. So it's less, not more, even though they're deliberately spiking their income for 8 years. That surprises people because conversions raise your premiums now, but lower them for the rest of your life. And the fourth thing is what their children actually receive. Non-spouse heirs had 10 years to empty an inherited pre-tax account. And if their kids are in their own peak earning years when that happens, that money comes out at their highest brackets. In our scenario, if the kids are in the 24% bracket, doing nothing leaves them 14.8 million, while the best scenario leaves them 15.6. If the kids are in the 37% bracket, doing nothing leaves them 14.1, while the best strategy is still at 15.6. So the second number didn't change, because when there's nothing left in the pre-tax accounts, your children's future tax bracket stops being your problem. Now, here's the comparison. For our couple, the after-tax family wealth at age 73, if they do nothing, is 7.7 million. The best strategy results in 8.2 million. At 82, it's 10.5 versus 11.4. At 90, it's 13.9 versus 15.6. So you notice the gap keeps widening because the decision doesn't just cost you once, it compounds. So doing nothing feels comfortable, but quietly builds a future tax problem. Now, filling the 22 or 24% bracket in the open years is often meaningfully better. In this household, filling the 24% bracket came out on top, with the dynamic strategy landing just about $300,000 behind it. But the dynamic version got there paying a lower effective tax rate, 14 versus 16, and it paid about $34,000 less in Medicare surcharges, which tells you something important. The gap between a good strategy and the best strategy is small and often dependent upon each individual situation. But the gap between doing nothing and either of the strategies is large. And the dynamic strategy tends to be the truest expression of good planning because the tax bracket alone does not answer the entire question. So let's go back to the question that started this video. Could converting the entire IRA in 1 year ever make sense? Converting the whole thing sounds extreme because it is extreme, but that doesn't automatically make it wrong. In this household, it didn't make sense. It actually finished last. Converting everything in 1 year cost them almost 1.3 million in tax. That's an effective rate of almost 36% on every dollar converted, while the dynamic strategy moved money out at 14%. Same account, same family, 2.5 times the price. And it left them with 14.3 million instead of 15.6. A full or very large conversion becomes more defensible when several things line up at once. An unusually low income year, a huge share of the family's wealth is in pre-tax accounts, there's plenty of cash on hand to pay the tax without raiding the IRA itself, a surviving spouse that will eventually face those compressed single brackets, high-earning adult kids who'd inherit the account and have to empty it over 10 years during their own peak earning years. So when enough of those may align, big conversion may be smarter than it first sounds. But it backfires just as easily. It's usually a mistake when the earnings tail is still paying out and the conversion lands in the 35 or 37% bracket, or when you'd have to pay the tax from the IRA itself, or when you might move to a lower tax state soon, or when there's a charitable intent and those pre-tax dollars could go to a charity tax efficiently later, or when the whole idea is being driven by the fear of taxes instead of an actual model. So here's the honest answer. The full conversion isn't a recommendation, but it's one scenario that has to be compared against the others. Now, some of you might be thinking, why would I convert at 24% when my future tax rate might be 22? And the answer is to get real money out before required distributions start and to protect your spouse and potentially your kids. In our example household, filling 24 beat filling 22 by almost $1 million. So the point isn't that a higher tax bracket is always wrong. It's that always convert and never convert are both truly guesses. The only way to know is to model the surviving spouse and the heirs, not just this year's return. Now, in this household, the tax control window was 8 years long. And every year they waited was roughly $300,000 in conversion capacity that they could never get back because the window closes on a schedule that you don't control. And every year you spend deciding is a year of capacity you don't get back. So how do you find your own window? 6 steps. And the first one is where people usually stop too early. Step 1 is to map out your entire income calendar, every source, every year. You cannot find your conversion window by looking only at your retirement date. Step 2 is to find your actual taxable income capacity. Estimate your taxable income before any conversion, and then see how much room is left in the bracket that you're targeting. And remember, gross income, taxable income, and the number that drives Medicare are 3 different things. Step 3 is price the hidden costs. A conversion can raise your state taxes, increase how much of your Social Security is taxed, trigger Medicare surcharges 2 years later, phase out deductions, and cost you subsidies. Although in some states, conversions after 59.5 aren't taxed by the state at all. So check with your state, because this could be a meaningful difference. Step 4 is to compare the future household, not just this year's tax return. Model the surviving spouse in single brackets. Model what your heirs will actually inherit and what potential brackets they'll be in when they do. Step 5 is confirm your liquidity and your time horizon. Where does the tax get paid from? Will your taxable accounts still cover your spending? And how long can that Roth money stay invested and grow? Step 6 is execute annually, not permanently. Your income changes, markets change, tax laws change, where you live might change. A conversion target you set 5 years in advance should never be followed blindly. So back to where we start. Handing the IRS the single biggest tax bill of your life in 1 year may or may not be reckless. In the right window, with the right numbers behind it, it could be a deliberate financial decision that a family can make. In our family's case, the model didn't say do it all at once, but it also said doing nothing would have a major cost as well. And if you want to see where your tax control window opens and closes, book a wealth strategy call so we can map your income calendar, your bracket capacity, your surviving family picture on one time. The link is in the description. And one important note, this video is for educational purposes and is not individualized tax, investment, or legal advice.